Okay folks, this is something a little different today. I'm experimenting with some in-car stuff. This is literally just using my phone at the moment, and I'll get something a bit more sophisticated in a bit. But I am using a lapel mic, as you can probably see. Now I'm sitting in my Mk1 Audi TT. First time this is going to be kind of stuff that I'm doing on the channel, so I want to do a bit more car stuff. As you can see, the exposure on the camera is fiddling it out. But I'm going to go for a drive and talk a little bit about this car and just see how well the recording works. So bear with me, we'll see how it goes. So what can I say about the Audi TT? Well, the story of this car starts back in kind of about 1994. It's surprisingly old now, and basically Audi was looking for a replacement for its aging coupe car, which itself was the replacement for the quite legendary Quattro, which also he was king of the rally circuit in the 80s. So the entire car is a sort of tour de force design. The interior is remarkably well designed and has a lot of flair, and I'll try and get you some pictures of that sort of stuff in a bit. Now the technical underpinnings of the car are not quite so sophisticated. The Audi TT is actually based upon the Mark IV Volkswagen Golf, which was contemporary with the car in the early 90s into the early 2000s. And as such, the TT did get a bit of the odd disparaging review as a result. Basically, it's a glorified hatchback, and there is a certain amount of criticism that can be accepted of that. Much of the suspension, certainly much of the steering, various other bits and pieces like that, are shared componentry-wise with arguably much more humble cars. And the TT was pitched to be a car that could compete with sports cars like the Porsche Boxster and things like that, the Nissan 350Z, and cars that were overtly sporting. And starting off with a hatchback isn't necessarily, or at least it wasn't back then, the place where you go to. Most of those cars were bespoke sports cars. The TT kind of wasn't, from an underpinnings perspective, and as a result, it did get a few badly panned reviews at the time, but most reviews were complimentary. It went quite well, and what you had ultimately was a very interesting looking car, very unique looking car that was unlike anything else that the car world had kind of ever seen. Now today, this particular car, by the way, is a 2003 model. And it's coming up for 20 years old. The original TTs, the first ones, are now well over 20 years old and are kind of drifting into classic territory. So the TT itself has kind of now gone past its banger stage in terms of pricing. It's so yeah, the TT's kind of gone past its banger stage of pricing now, and you used to be able to pick these up for £1,000, £2,000 quite easily. Now most of the bad ones have been weeded out now, as a result of them being around for such a long time. This one I paid a little bit more than that for, because I wanted one that hadn't been hacked about and modified. An awful lot of these are modified. People re-chipped them, change the suspension, change the wheels, muck about with the air intakes and all sorts of stuff. And there's nothing really wrong with that intrinsically. I quite like modifying cars myself. However, I don't trust other people to do it. So I would very rarely buy a modified car unless I was really, really, really sure of the quality of the person who'd been doing the modifying, and it's very difficult to gauge that just by looking at the car. So if you do want one of these, I would recommend you buy a standard one, and as a result there aren't that many standard ones left, so the prices are now on the uptick, and this is a car that is pipped to become a bit of a future classic in years to come. So we'll see. You're not going to make a vast amount of money on them because they are still too common. They did sell very, very well. They're not particularly rare, although they obviously are getting rarer over time. And yeah, they are mildly collectible at this point in time. Quite an interesting little car. I'm just going to switch over to my other camera now, just so we'll see how that goes. Okay, I'll see if this second camera works. I don't know if it's set up to pick up the external camera or not. We'll find out. If there is no audio on this bit, then that'll be why. Right, so off we go again. So the TT is actually, in most incarnations, certainly in the UK, is a four-wheel drive car. It is badged Quattro. Technically it kind of isn't a Quattro. Audi badged it as a Quattro. It actually has a Haldex part-time four-wheel drive system, which means that most of the time the car is front-wheel drive, and only when it needs to, i.e. it senses using the ABS sensors that the front wheels are losing grip, then it can shovel some of the power to the back wheels, about 50% of it in stock form. So it's not really a four-wheel drive car in the classic Quattro sense, but it does have a four-wheel drive ability in certain conditions. Now I've experienced that in the wet, and it actually is quite impressive. The car will not wheel spin, it just goes forward no matter what you do. You can be pretty brutal with the throttle and it will literally just shoot off, which is cool. So it's very sure-footed as a car. You'd have to be doing something pretty stupid to unseat an Audi TT. And to be honest, if you go into a corner too fast in this car, it does what you would kind of expect most hatchback style, saloon style cars to do. It understeers, and it has a very aggressive or early interruption traction control system, which kills the power, brakes the wheels, and brings the car back into line. Now, there's a little bit of story behind the ESP program of these cars, the electronic stability programs, and that was basically due to the fact that when the car first came out, it didn't have ESP, and it didn't have, it had slightly more aggressive suspension settings than it does now. Now that resulted in a car that, for the time, apparently in the earlier reviews, was lauded for handling and fun, which is not something you tend to associate with the Audi TT now. And but there were some very high profile crashes of the car in those early days, and it's not entirely clear looking at now whether that was driver error or whether there was something fundamentally wrong with the car. But as a result, Audi recalled the TT, put this electronic stability program onto the car, changed the suspension, making it a lot kind of softer and more. Examples of the Audi TT which do have the spoiler on the back, but they are few and far between and quite collectible. I'm not sure if I'd want to take one of those for a high-speed drive or not. You'd have to wait and see. But so there we go. The underpinnings of the car are, as I said before, very relatively humdrum. They are certainly based off the Mark IV Golf, sharing engines, and so on and so forth. So you've got the classic 1.8 litre turbo engine. That's what this car has. In this particular example, it's generating 225 brake horsepower, which is not bad really for a 1.8 litre turbo engine of 20 years age. Still certainly quick enough to keep up with modern traffic, without breaking a sweat. It does have a degree of turbo lag. It's relatively old school, but on the long run still does 40 miles per gallon, which I think is pretty good for a sporty car. My evaluation of this car really is, well, the handling is dull. Okay, there's no way around that. It's safe, it's sensible, it's dull. It's not in any way sporty in standard trim. Now you can do stuff to these cars and change the suspension, and you can do that on any cars. But I tend to evaluate cars on how they are as standard, and the TT is dull. It's very, very safe. It's a lovely place to be. It's a great car for doing long distance driving in. It looks fantastic. It's nice and it's relatively quiet. The ride is a little bit hard in terms of bump absorption and stuff. I'm just going to do a little sprint up the bypass, so I'll just call out some performance figures. So what speed am I doing at the moment? Right, so I'm in third gear actually at the moment, and I'm doing 30 miles an hour. So I'm just going to put my foot down. Here we go. And that's 60, and that's 70. So it's quick, it's brisk. I wouldn't say it was fast. The book 0 to 60 time for this car is about 6.5 seconds to 60. It's supposed to have a top speed just over 150 miles an hour, which is fast enough for a daily driver, which is exactly what I've got it for. Is it a sports car? No, it's not. Not to drive anyway. It doesn't really live up to it. What it is really, I think, is a mini GT. It's very, very good at doing long distance cruises. It's not very large, but the boot is big enough that you can get a whole bunch of stuff in it for two people. It does have some back seats, as you can see. They are useless. I don't know why they're there. They are entirely pointless. So I'm not quite sure what they were thinking there. Unless you've got really, really, really small children with no legs. That's about it. But for me, as a car that I can use to go places, it's small enough to be manoeuvrable. It's comfortable enough to be good on long distance. It's much more interesting to look at than an SUV or a saloon car. There's no downside to driving it really. I'm just going to give it another little blast back here. So that's second gear. And I'm already at 70. That's how quick it gets up to those sort of speeds. It doesn't hang about, and yet I can get 40 miles per gallon on a cruise at 70 miles an hour over long distance drive. So it's kind of a mini GT. That's what it's good at. It's fast enough. It handles well enough. It's good at long distance drives, but it's not the sort of car that you take to a track day and go, yes, this is great fun. It just isn't. And I don't know whether it ever was going to be. It was kind of originally pitched against things like the Porsche Boxster and the Nissan 350Z, but those cars are way better as sports cars. But I don't think those cars would be as good every day. The TT, you can use 100% of its ability 100% of the time. Come rain, come wind, come snow, the car is still utterly reliable, utterly dependable. Very. So for a sporty, quickish car that you can use every day, that's what it does. It isn't the best at any of those things, but it can do them all. It's a sort of almost a general purpose sports car. Does that make sense? Now, I've always liked the design. I think the design is the best part of these cars. I think they look fantastic, and they're different, and they're now old enough to start having appreciated a bit as a classic car in themselves. I think they're rather attractive design. I'll get some pictures of the car in just a moment from the outside, so we can have a look at it. But yeah, I would recommend it if you want a car that is pleasant, quick, brisk, very, very capable, looks different, looks interesting, and can do a lot of long distance drives very, very comfortably. This is a brilliant car for that. If you want something that is tactile feedback, kind of sports car-y thing, this isn't that car. It's too soft in its responses. It's too dull, I can see why people said it's a bit of a fashion accessory, because it kind of is. Its looks promise a level of performance that, and handling stuff, it really doesn't have. But yeah, as a package, it's a lovely car to drive. It's got a lovely 6-speed manual gearbox. It's quick, it's responsive, and it's pretty economical for what it actually is. It's not too large. Great boot for carrying stuff. It's a fun car. It's a fun car. So I use it as my daily driver. A task for which it does greatly, and it's just nice to have a slightly, I want a reliable car, and one thing I will say for it, it has been absolutely 100% reliable, this car, in the 2 years I've had it. There's nothing that's gone wrong with it at all. No dashboard lights, nothing. Always passed its MOT with no issues. And there's an awful lot of complaints online about Audi TTs being unreliable, but then you look at what the owners have done to them. They've modified this and modified that, and wonder why their cars stopped working. So yeah, that's the explanation for that. Don't buy a really cheap one. You want one that's been looked after, and that was what I basically did. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed a little tour of the Audi TT. I'm just going to grab some footage of the outside, and we'll see if this worked. See you soon, my friends. Bye bye.